Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of The Committee Reads. I am your host KWCEs, and with me today I have Fat Bacon Unicorn, GVR, and Alex. And today we will be going over KWCE number 14, Gargorgon vs. Skullcrawler vs. Godzilla Monsterverse by Koopzilla 1999.
Yeah, fucking Bacon ruined this the first time.
Stay tuned for the behind the scenes on that.
So I go first, or KWCEs goes first?
I go first.
Okay.
Know your place, bitch.
Right. 3 years passed since the Battle of San Francisco. Following the tiring battle with the Mutos, Godzilla returned to the sea from whence it came. The encounter took its toll on the Predator, taking time to return to his prime. Eventually, he would regain enough strength for him to continue his role as Earth's balancing force. And fortunately for him, he was right on time. At the bottom of the Atlantic seafloor, a massive beast was lying dormant. Millions of years ago, the creature came to Earth from the deepest reaches of outer space, searching for sustenance in the form of Earth's inhabitants, possibly make the Earth her new home. However, another creature had arrived on Earth at the same time, seeking Earth's life forms not for sustenance, but instead to simply destroy them and the Earth itself, as it had done with many civilizations and planets before. This would lead to the two of them battling over the fate of the Earth itself. In the end, their duel ended with both of them crashing into the Earth, being forced into a deep slumber. One of the creatures was sealed underneath a massive ice sheet in Antarctica, while the other fell to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean sea floor, not too far away from the other one's location. While the monster in Antarctica had already been discovered and researched by the organization Monarch, they have yet to be made aware of the other beast, and someone was going to make sure it stayed that way. Godzilla swam to the monster's location as fast as he could, hoping to get to it before it awoke. It had known of this creature's presence since it first arrived on this planet, and was waiting for the right time to strike. The humans were very close to discovering this monstrosity, and when they did, it would inevitably cause mass destruction. Determined to prevent this from happening, Godzilla was already preparing a blast of atomic energy, ready to unleash its devastating weapon once the monster was in sight. He only needed to travel one more mile before it would be in range. Gargorgon awoke. The time she spent slumbering was irrelevant, but she was quick to realize that danger was approaching, and she needed to escape fast. Once she began swimming up, swimming up towards the surface, she looked down to see a blue beam of energy pass right underneath her feet. Gargorgon looked behind her to find the source of the blast, watching Godzilla as Godzilla swam towards her. This was not the monster she was looking for, and as such, she decided it was not worth her time. She swam closer and closer to the surface in order to avoid a fight that she wasn't prepared for. Godzilla gave chase, but could not catch Gargorgon in time. Godzilla tried to blast Gargorgon with his atomic ray, but with the help of her arm heads, turned back to face him and guide her. She was able to dodge each blast. Her left head opened fire, sizzling through the Atlantic waters and ramming up Godzilla's cranium, sending the ancient king spinning. With the Monster King distracted, Gargorgon accelerated and took to the surface. Eventually, she escaped the Atlantic and encased herself in her travel ball, flying high into the air. Knowing she was safe, she decided the best course of action was to retreat and find a new place to recuperate. Then she created a portal and went through it, hoping it would take her to a safer and, more importantly, quieter location for her to recover. Realizing that the enemy had fled, Godzilla dipped under the ocean, hoping to pursue his latest adversary, wherever she went. Pass.
Oh, my turn?
Yes, your turn, Bacon.
Okay, my bad. Meanwhile, on the treacherous island known as Skull Island, a pack of two awakened serpentine-like creatures, 5 of them were feasting on the remains of a mirror squid that they had found and dragged into their favorite place to dine, the Boneyard, a massive kaiju-sized graveyard, littered with skulls, bones, and rib cages of inhabitants that were once prevalent on the island, now all but eradicated by the vicious Skullcrawlers. The internal hunger of each of the Skullcrawlers felt was so strong they started clawing and lunging at each other, trying to keep the rest of them back so then they could have what remains of the squid for themselves. As they fought over who would get to keep the squid, their attention was suddenly drawn to what appeared to be a hole opening up in the sky. They watched as Gargorgon emerged from the portal, when in front of them of the smaller creatures. Believing the monster was here for their kill, the Skullcrawlers began to eye each other, agreeing to work together to repel the bigger threat. One of them stepped forward, the 2 of them moving around to Gargorgon's left and the other 2 to the right. Gargorgon looked over at the hideous Skullcrawlers. She was disappointed to be met by more creatures that weren't her intended target. The good thing was that they were much smaller than the monsters she encountered a few moments prior. Each of the Skullcrawlers present were no longer than 30 meters, less than a third of Gargorgon's towering height, until she found that creature that rudely disturbed her slumber, or better yet, her sworn enemy. These pests would make a good warm-up. Once the Skullcrawlers had Gargorgon surrounded, the beast to her left and right lunged at her, being zapped by lightning bolts fired from her shoulder heads. The mutts dropped to the ground, struggling to move. Gargorgon turned to face the others to her left, unable to move. The Skullcrawlers could only watch as Gargorgon lifted herself off the ground, dropping her feet onto their skulls, crushing them instantly. Gargorgon looked down upon the headless Skullcrawler corpses. She looked up and saw 2 others jump in front of her. She barely had enough time to grab them by their throats, their shoulder heads blasting bolts of lightning down their gaping maws, frying their innards. She could let go of their fried husks, crushing their skulls with delight. When she remembered that they were still 1 left, she turned to where she last saw it, only to see a giant hole in the ground. Confused, she looked around, trying to find the last of these Skullcrawlers. Unfortunately for Gargorgon, it found her first. The 5th Skullcrawler emerged from underneath.
Pass to me.
Oh, pass.
Yeah. The 5th Skullcrawler emerged from underneath the ground behind her, quickly flinging itself from the ground and digging its claws into Gargorgon's back. Fighting against the pain, she had her shoulder heads extend to grab the Skullcrawler by the arms. The smaller creature anticipated this, however, and clawed at them when they got close. What it didn't anticipate was Gargorgon using her tails to wrap around the Skullcrawlers, dragging it further down her back. However, the Skullcrawler still had its claws dug into her back, and as Gargorgon dragged the beast with her tails, the nails tore her flesh as it was pulled out. When she finally removed the pest and flung it aside, Gargorgon examined her wounds, bloodied gashes, and tears covering her back. The Skullcrawler was quick to its feet and prepared to strike at her again. Another Skullcrawler emerged from the hole in the ground the other one made. Gargorgon, upon seeing this new one's much larger size, took a step back. The smaller one, unaware of its brethren's presence, charged at her again, but was stopped in its tracks when the big one stomped down on the smaller lizard's back, breaking its spine. Gargorgon watched as a 6th Skullcrawler, or rather a Skull Devil, picked up its smaller brethren and devoured it. Once it was finished with its snack, it turned its attention to Gargorgon. She glared at the enormous lizard, and once again realizing that this beast was more than over 5 times the size of the other pests, she considered fleeing again. But as she began to lift her feet off the ground, she stopped herself, deciding not to back down and fight back. After all, she had easily disposed of multiple smaller ones at once, so how would one larger member of its kind be any more threatening? Gargorgon snarled at the beast, daring it to make its move. The Skull Devil was more than happy to oblige. The Skull Devil charged at Gargorgon, intent on tackling her to the ground. She was quick to spring to her feet and dodge the attack, landing on her feet on a nearby hill. Looking down at the Skull Devil and mocking it, her shoulder heads fired bolts of lightning at the Skull Devil, who was able to dodge the blasts. As the ravenous lizard began to sprint in a large circle around the hill Gargorgon stood on, Gargorgon tried to connect several lightning bolts on it, while the Skull Devil, not slowing its pace, avoided many of them until... bang. Author, you need to use other titles for Gargorgon, please.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
Oh, am I reading now?
Oh, no. Just
sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just stopping to complain.
Damn, I ruined your complaining. I'm sorry, help me.
One bolt managed to hit the creature in its right leg, tripping the beast as it fell on its face. Closing in on her target, Gargorgon cackled and mocked the Skull Devil once more. Enraged, the Skull Devil leapt into the air, grabbing onto her arms and pushing her into the ground. Upon landing, the oversized lizard dug its claws into the earth with its palms pressed against her arms. Her left shoulder head tried to fire a lightning bolt directly at its face, but the Skull Devil expected this and instantly clamped its jaws around the shoulder head's neck, disabling it. The right hood was able to get a direct hit on what it thought was its left eye. Although it did shock the creature slightly, the damage was not as severe as Gargorgon thought it would be. When the Skull Devil snapped its head back at the shoulder head and yanked it off with the strength of its jaws, Gargorgon, despite suffering immense pain, caught a glimpse at the side of its head, seeing its real eyes. The Skull Devil had tricked her into believing that the empty eye sockets on the front of its head were its real eyes. Staring down at its adversary as her mouth widened, the Skull Devil had realized that she had been tricked by its false eyes, which had saved it many times in the past. Knowing that she was stunned and unable to retaliate with her shoulder cannons taken care of, the Skull Devil laughed in Gargorgon's face. Looking down at her and wanting to toy with its prey, the reptilian beast sadistically licked the side of Gargorgon's face. It momentarily removed its claws from Gargorgon's arms, only to dig its claws straight into them. The Skull Devil pressed more of its weight into her arms, enjoying the victim's cries of agony. Little did it know, however, that Gargorgon already had her own cruel, unforgiving side of her. Desperate to free herself from the Skull Devil's grasp, she... Oh, quit... I don't know what's up with me today. She slowly opened her hidden eye from within her mouth. The Skull Devil couldn't help but gaze at it with shock and curiosity. As it moved its serpentine tail to the side, Gargorgon's twin tails rose upward, shaking rapidly as if they were rattlesnake tails. Perplexed and caught off guard, the Skull Devil looked over at her tails, then back at her eye, which was beginning to glow as her horns crackled with energy. The Skull Devil then decided it was time to finish its opponent, and fast before she can attack, and opened its mouth wide to clamp down on her face. However, just before it could sink its teeth into her flesh, her eye unleashed an energy beam right into its gaping maw. The Skull Devil was pushed into a nearby rib cage, shattering it and knocking the creature on its back. When the Skull Devil attempted to get to its feet, it couldn't move its limbs at all. In fact, when it looked over at its legs, they were turning into stone. The stone quickly moved across the rest of the Skull Devil's body until it reached its neck. With one last screech, the Skull Devil was silenced as its head was turned to stone. As well. Pass.
Alright. After a few minutes, Gargorgon brought herself back on her feet, stomping towards the immobilized Skull Devil. Looking down at its face after staring at it for a few moments, she brought her foot up and crushed its skull, and did the same with the rest of its body immediately after. After reducing the Skull Devil to dust, Gargorgon fell to her knees exhausted. She had arrived on the island in order to escape her pursuer, find a place where she could not be disturbed. However, upon arrival on the island, she was met with nothing but fishes and annoying pests that made her shaken condition even worse. Her back was scarred, she had numerous broken bones in her arms, and one of her shoulder heads was completely torn off, the other with a broken neck and unable to fire off lightning. However, as Gargorgon looked over to her torn shoulder, she could see another head beginning to form. Hopefully it wouldn't take too long before she could fully regenerate and leave this accursed island. Until then, she would have to stay still and rest. She was not afraid of any more pests emerging to strike, as if there were any left, they would know well enough not to mess with the one that had killed the most feared and powerful member of their species. All Gargorgon would have to worry about is waiting for her wounds to finish regenerating. God damn, that name is irritating me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Meanwhile, on the island's highest peak, another being looked at the nearby ocean, and the storm clouds perpetually surrounding the island. None had been brave or strong enough to cross through the deadly storms that closed the island off from outsiders. Not since that day, nearly 45 years ago. However, as the island guardian looked closer at the farthest end of the ocean, he spotted something emerging from the storm clouds and swim closer to the island. Kong flared his nostrils, not pleased to see that someone was intruding on his territory. Kong squinted his eyes as he tried to identify the creature, but all he could see were the creature's jagged dorsal fins jutting from its back. Kong then felt a sudden feeling of rage. He didn't fully understand why the sight of this creature enraged him so much. Something about it just seemed so familiar, as if they had been Kong's mortal enemy for decades, if not longer, and that they had been in a constant battle since they were brought into this world, and yet Kong did not recall having met them before in his life. Regardless, if this monster decided to step foot onto the island shore, Kong would make him regret it. and rewarded him with a pummeling he would never forget. As Godzilla swam closer and closer to the island, having felt Gargorgon's presence nearby, and endured the dreadful storms, he too felt as if there was an even bigger presence waiting for him, a presence that made his blood boil. He did not think it would have been caused by Gargorgon, god damn it, but rather some other force on the island. When he stopped briefly to lift his head from the water, he saw him, staring down at him from the highest point of the island. Their burning hatred for each other resonated as they locked eyes, even though the two were still very far apart. They could still see the hatred in each other's eyes as clear as day. Godzilla tucked his head back down into the ocean, swimming closer to the shore. Kong began to make his way down from the mountain he was standing on top of. Determined to meet the creature when he arrives, they drew closer to each other by the minute, knowing full well that when they do finally meet, two legendary kings will clash. Alright,
so clearly I do recall making some edits to this one, and clearly I didn't get everything. This was 2018 me. I was still I hadn't gotten quite good yet. I hadn't quite gotten get good. So there are some blatant there is swapping of present tense and past tense. It may not be like super egregious, but it is still somewhat noticeable looking back at it. With that said, though, I think my other big criticism, and I'm pretty sure you probably noticed that with the way we're all stumbling on it, Gargorgon. I'm sorry. Like, don't get me wrong, the portrayal of the monster was really cool. I like the monster, I like her journey, and, you know, I didn't mind that it ended at a point where the journey wasn't complete, you know, leave the story open for another time. But the name, you need to use other descriptions other than her name.
Yeah, because that was getting tiresome to say.
Yeah, it's a really hard to pronounce. It's not a a tongue that slips off the tongue real easy. It's kind of confusing and somewhat tongue twisty. So you really have to pay it. So yeah, I think next time this character is used, make sure to use their subtitles or their alternate names or just descriptions in general, just so we know who we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, though,
because she did.
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, she does have a subtitle, Petrification Demon Beast.
Yeah, which makes sense.
That would have been much better to use than just Gargorgon every time.
Yeah, no kidding. Or the Petrification Alien or something. I don't know. But yeah, no, I think her story was surprisingly compelling, and I think aside from her story was compelling, and the other monsters were actually, I think, characterized very solidly. This was a pre-King of the Monsters story, obviously, where we only just had, some of the details, like Monarch's records of King Ghidorah and junk. But all things, like a post-Kong Skull Island, but a pre-King of the Monsters story. But that considered, though, I like the way this is paced. I like the way things don't last, forever. It doesn't drag itself out too long. And I think one of my personal favorite bits out of this match was the fact that the Skull Devil just didn't give a crap about the smaller one. Literally crushed one of the smaller ones underfoot and ate it. It's hell yeah, you get the idea.
Yeah.
So I think, the characterization of the monsters are on point. And like I said, I think Gargorgon's story is interesting. Godzilla usually attacks aliens, so it's okay, that makes sense. But she's not at least reviewing the story from her perspective, and I think that's very interesting. I just wish her name was a lot easier to slip off the tongue.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I still, in spite of the grammatical errors that were, probably an oversight on my part, and the and just the repetition of names, I think this is a really good match. That said, there is one thing that's now coming back to mind that I remember, that the original winner for this, I think, was Godzilla, but the way the story ended just didn't make sense. So this
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I think this has been the only time in KWC or KWCE history where I've actively changed the winner, because it just didn't add up. Gargorgon's the one we focus on the story more, and the ending bit there just simply teases Godzilla versus Kong. So to me, that's like not. I mean, like Godzilla's still alive. You could say he lost the moment she retreated, in a sense. I'm willing to justify that. Justify it through that sort of lens. Nevertheless, though, I really do enjoy her story, and I hope there is a continuation for this because probably once Godzilla vs. Kong comes out, knowing our luck, so that way we just get an idea of what we're going for, go from there. So
yeah, I was gonna say, going on to that, it's like I can understand where the author's coming from, and I don't mind a brief skirmish between Godzilla and Godzilla. But it's like, do we actually really need to have Godzilla actually be credited in the match? It could have just been Gargorgon versus Skullcrawler with a cameo by Godzilla.
That is true. No, that is actually very true. The match I received had Godzilla in the title, so I ran with it. But the way the story is structured, it easily just could have been Gargorgon versus Skullcrawler, cameo featuring Godzilla, cameoing Kong and Ghidorah. Totally could have done without Godzilla in this story. Outside of a brief skirmish, he doesn't really contribute anything solid.
He just shoots one atomic ray, and then she shoots him back, and then runs.
Oh, right. It's not substantial, nothing too crazy. So it's in that sense, I wasn't going to go that far as to remove Godzilla from the match, but I wasn't going to accept Godzilla being the winner in a fight he basically didn't partake in with that Skullcrawler segment. So yeah, no, that's very much again, I still really like the match all around. I just wish it could have one, I wish there was a continuation. Let's just get that continuation ball rolling. Sooner or later, maybe. I don't know. So.
Match is a bit whack in its structure. That's gonna be the opening. It I don't know. It built up Godzilla for a second, and then he just is there for 2 seconds, then says adios. The fight was cool itself. I just, like all you said, I don't really know if Godzilla should have been credited at all. He's just kind of there.
Alright. Anything else, Bacon? Or?
Nah, that's my thoughts.
Alright, GVR, what'd you think?
I can't really think of anything to say that you didn't already say.
Damn.
Alex, what are your thoughts? Wait.
Yeah, I sort of gave my thoughts on the Godzilla side of things. Yeah, the fight was solid between the two actual combatants. Yeah, I think everyone basically said it had some structure and grammatical errors. And like I said, I already said my biggest criticism with Godzilla, so not much I could really say.
Alright, I don't know.
That hasn't already been said.
Yeah. So, and who knows, if there is a continuation of this, maybe it could justify as a match independent, it has some structural problems and whatnot, but maybe if there is a sequel to this, maybe the way it'll be structured could at least semi-justify some of the placement here. So, see where that goes. But that will be a story for another time, as that is all for match 14. We'll see you guys next time for match 15. Till then, everyone.
Bye.